Okay, you're good to go.
Excellent. Okay, so like I said, this is designing for change. This is our methodology here at the Path and Agent of Change. Path and Agent of Change is a nonprofit that started back in 2021, where I dedicated my master's degree in psychology to understanding structural racism, but not just understanding it, but how do I create tangible solutions that actually move us forward away from the issues that we have in society today. And so during that trial and error and progress of finding an engine that would lead to tangibility, I created Designing for Change. And so today you will have the of opportunity to learn this methodology, and through prayerful interaction, if you're not able to interact, you will still be able to learn what this is and apply it to your everyday life. So, my first thing that I always do is I commit to something, and I need you to hold me to that commitment. So, the first commitment that I give you is that I promise that by the end of this workshop, you will have something that has changed your life forever. Again, my promise to you is by the end of this workshop, you will have something that will change your life forever. So if you hold me to that commitment, can you please put in the chat, I hold you to it before we get started? I'll hold you to it. Put it in there. I hold you to that commitment. All right, here we go. So some norms for this meeting. Now, normally this meeting is in person, right? Due to some constraints with the location and whatnot, we are virtual, but still, these norms are normal for any meeting. And so, the reality of this meeting is that we have to listen actively. I know you're at work, so it might be hard, but try your best to listen actively, refrain from making judgments, right? Communicate to be understood, be aware of emotional triggers, be mindful of the relationships we have in this room. Right now, the relationship we have in this meeting room is that we're all learners, right? We're all students of education. We are all people here to learn something greater, to change our lives, right? So be mindful of those relationships and then work to find common ground. So the common ground that we're working today is that I gave a promise that I must commit to, but in order for that promise and that commitment to be withheld, you must hold me to it, right? So we're finding the common ground through a promise that our lives will be changed after this meeting. Now, ironically, this design came about designing for change. How do you make the most powerful, most productive, most collaborative meeting that you've ever had without some norms to counteract unproductive meetings, to counteract innovative meetings, to counteract meetings that just don't make sense, meetings that are boring? How do you do this? And so we designed even how we conduct meetings so that we always meet the mark. And these are some of the norms that we have when we're meeting. So normally I have a reader for this, but I'm going to read this. So Melinda Gates, as you know, Bill Gates' wife, came up with this amazing quote that is at the center of UX design. This quote is probably known by every UX designer who's actually intentional about UX designing. And so it says, design dignifies. It exists not for itself, but for those whom it serves. It honors its user, who they are, where they are coming from, what they are to achieve. I'm going to read that again. A design honors its user, who they are, where they are coming from, and what they want to achieve. It proves that their preferences are important and that their voices have been heard. Great design starts with listening, and the product is produces is an expression of empathy. So whenever you design a product, particularly in UX design, it should be an expression of empathy for something you've heard for the person you're designing that thing for. So literally that goes across all the spectrums of professions out there. If you're a doctor, you should design the patient experience based off of listening to the patient, and the product of that listening should be an expression of empathy for your patient. If you are like Apple, you should design a product based on listening to your users, and in listening to them, this phone should be an expression of empathy for anybody that is an Apple user. For instance, our geriatric community. How hard is technology for them? Well, let's listen to them and let's make technology easier. So, in the same regard, we began to design for social change, listening to people. And like I said at the beginning, creating a nonprofit to deal with structural racism. How do we listen to people? And then the products of what we've listened to are now expressions of empathy that lead to social change. And so this is powerful. This is extremely powerful. And in order to be a more powerful listener, there's actually something called the equation of change. So understand the equation of change is key. But the big key is changing the mind. As you change the mind of a person, you may introduce somebody to something they never known that they needed, right? You may make a person more aware of something about themselves that they never knew before, which initially already started to change their mindset about something. No matter what it is, you can literally apply this to anything, but you can change someone's mindset about something. And so Abraham Maslow said, what is necessary to change a person is to change their awareness of themselves. What is necessary, what is a requirement, what is imperative to change a person is to change their awareness of themselves. So, to help support someone in leading them to some change, and think about it with technology, you can think about this with transportation, you can think about this with life in general. A person must be aware of themselves in order to lead them to change. And this is how you do that. So, as I promised, the equation of change. Now, this equation you see here is actually Dana Miller's formula for change. The original glacier formula did not include one of the most important things that was underestimated and not understood. Glacier's formula said that D plus V plus Fs equaled C. D is dissatisfaction. So dissatisfaction with the status quo, dissatisfaction with the way things are. V is a vision, a picture of something future from now, a future state, a future time, a future modification, a future progress, a vision. And then FS were the first steps. So Glacier thought, if I give a person dissatisfaction with their status quo, right, dissatisfaction of where they're at right now, give them a vision of where they could be, and then give them the first few steps, it should lead them to change. And I'm sure it may have worked for few people, but for the majority, there was something wrong that it still was not leading to change, no matter how dissatisfied a person was, no matter what vision you gave them of the future, and no matter how many first steps you gave them. Let's put this into context of technology. You cannot change an Android person over to Apple if you have not dealt with the R, which is called resistance. What resistance to change am I missing that dissatisfaction between Android products and Apple products and vice versa? The vision of how vice versa product is better, and then the first steps to ascertain that product or learn how to do that is not leading them to switch to either or product. So Dana Miller created the formula to include that your dissatisfaction plus vision plus your first steps, all of that must be greater than resistance in order for change. Now, that's still very highly technical, right? We still look at this from the perspective of, okay, what do we mean by dissatisfaction? What do we mean by vision? What do we mean by first steps? What do we mean by resistance? So I'm going to explain it in a way that it makes more sense to you, okay? And if it makes sense to you this way, go ahead and put a thumbs up in the chat box, okay? So, how do we break this down? So with the equation change, we talk about dissatisfaction, vision, first steps must be greater than resistance in order for change to occur. So your dissatisfaction is your why. Why plus your what plus your how must be greater than your norms. Why plus your what plus your how must be greater than the norms in order for change to occur. So why? We were dissatisfied at the path with having boring meetings. We were dissatisfied with having a lack of engagement, a lack of participation in the meeting. We were bored with having unproductive conversations. We were bored with having conversations that did not lead to tangibility. So we were dissatisfied with the status quo of how we were conducting meetings. So what did we do? We started asking the question of what does a good meeting look like? What does a good meeting that will always be productive, always be innovative, always lead to some type of tangible outcome? What does that look like? And then the second thing was how? How do we reach this vision? How do we make this possible? Well, first off, we must come together and decide for each other what will be the new norms to contradict the old norms that are now resistors, right? Old norms could be, I don't have time for this meeting. I don't know what this meeting is about. I'm hearing something in this meeting I don't like, so I'm placing judgment on it. I'm not respecting the people in the room because I have personal issues with people in the room. Okay, we're all in this meeting, we're on different teams, but we have not established common grounds. Oh, wow. So we applied even the equation of change to how we conduct meetings with our organization. Imagine applying this to not just your professional life, but your everyday life, where you're dissatisfied with having arguments with people that you love, right? You're dissatisfied with having arguments with your children. So you come up with what that is supposed to look like. You understand what first steps it needs to take, but you also evaluate what resistors are in the way of this tangible outcome coming. So, as a nonprofit organization, the question that we began to ask ourselves when it came to designing for social change with our programming was, how do we remain socially relevant? There are so many nonprofit organizations that are irrelevant. Irrelevant. And they're irrelevant because they do not meet the mark. They do not do what is necessary to design programs that are centered on helping the person. They are designing programs that are centered on helping the problem. And because of that, you get a blanket, generalized, universal system of solutions that get placed onto people that not ever really truly produces change in that person's life. And I'm going to show you why that happens. Because the first step, let's backtrack. Okay, we have a nonprofit that wants to cater to the homeless because we want to end homelessness. So clearly, we have a dissatisfaction with homelessness. We have a dissatisfaction with the status of people that are in homeless states. Okay, cool. Vision, we're creating a nonprofit to deal with homelessness. What are our first steps? Well, they're homeless, so they need a house, or they need a job, or they need to eat, or you don't know what the person needs. So, the first step that you need to deal with when you're looking at resistors, you're looking at norms that get in the way of change, is this powerful thing right here: dealing with assumptions. Dealing with assumptions. The first step, your first step to social change is to deal with assumptions. The first step that a person must take with their iPhone is to deal with assumptions. Stop assuming you know how to provide somebody something. Stop assuming you know that this thing will help this person. Stop assuming that you know that what your solution is will resolve a problem. And this is how you do it. Okay, you ready? So this, I just need a little engagement from you to go through this little part right here. Okay. All right. So it says a picture speaks 1,000 assumptions. So if you can, I'm gonna be light. Give me two assumptions you have about this picture you see right here. Give me at least two assumptions. Two assumptions.
Two assumptions I would make about this picture. For one, I would say this person has a nice job because they're dressed very well. And two, I would say they work very hard because they look tired. So those would be
Mm,
my two assumptions.
beautiful. So it looked like they have a good job because of how the way they're dressed. And then you said it looks like they're tired because, of course, they're taking a nap, right? Did I get it right?
Yes, sir. That's right.
Okay, beautiful. So excellent assumptions. Now, there are some other elements in this picture that might lead to a different assumption. For instance, I put a little Easter egg in there. I put a bag on the floor with my nonprofit logo, right? Signifying that a nonprofit may have came by, saw a man on a bench, and left some food for him, assuming that he didn't have food to eat, right? Complete assumption. But like you saw a person that probably has a decent job because of the way they're dressed, and probably just taking a nap because they're stressed out or they're relaxing, right? But this nonprofit assumed this is a poor person because he's laying on a park bench. And we make the assumptions. Go ahead. No, no, no. You came off.
No, yeah, I was just gonna say that's true. Like looking at it from a different side, like you know, it just depends on how you view it and how you think about it.
Right. Now imagine you having this type of thought process and you have a nonprofit that's funded, but you just giving out food randomly because you're making assumptions about people. Now watch this. Statistics says something totally different. So if you thought he was on his lunch break, if you thought that, right? You thought he's just a well clean dressed person on his lunch break, statistically, 19.6 million white, non Hispanic Americans are living in poverty. So the reality is, he could actually be a poor person. And that clothes was some clothes he got from a drive. And he could actually need food, right? He could actually need food. It's a potential, right? Could be right. The nonprofit could be absolutely right. But he's asleep. And you never did anything to find out more context, so you just made an assumption. And if you did do something, let's just think about this. If you think he's homeless, in record, here's a record in 2016, it was recorded that 600,000 people are homeless in America. 600,000. Now, that's probably a way higher number because there's probably a large unaccounted for number of population, but we'll go with what data says. So if there's 600,000 people that are homeless in America, that means that it's 1 in 500 people are homeless in America. Now, if you're honest, when you drive around the city and you see homeless, you may be able to count on your finger how many homeless people you see. 10, maybe you might have to go to the double digits, 20, depending on if it's a large city, because 1 in 500 people are actually homeless. So the odds of that man being homeless is very low that you ran into the 1 out of 500 people that are homeless, particularly because he is clean dressed. And then lastly, okay, if you didn't think anything, then that's perfect, because it's so important not to make assumptions when you get to a solution. And this is why. We should always empathize by observation. We should always empathize by observation. This means immersing yourself in the real world, right? Apple sends out 1,000 surveys, but on top of them sending out surveys, they have people that are very strategic and paying attention to how you function as an Apple user. Likewise, most technology companies have this as well because they need to be immersed in the real world when it comes to a product. Same thing with nonprofits. You should be. Many nonprofits are not, but they should be immersed in the real world, which means they should get to know the population of people. Like I said previously, they need to understand the context. As you understand context, you can do the next step. See, now these are the first steps, right? First step was dealing with assumption. Second step, get to know your population. Third step, understand the context. Fourth step, uncover the needs. Now I can uncover some needs about this person because I understand the context. But then the most important part is to listen for feedback because again, it is important to design solutions that are make the needs of the people and honor their voices, right? So listen for feedback. So let's just change this around. Let's try the same exercise, but let's try this. What questions can we ask this gentleman on the bench? Give me at least two questions.
Let's see, two questions. Maybe I will ask him one, what he does for a living, and
Okay,
two, I'm kind of curious why he's laying on a park bench. Maybe,
excellent.
did he not have any other options? I would probably ask those two questions.
Now, wouldn't those two questions answer and give you context, right?
Yes, they'll let me know a little bit more about what's going on.
Right. You ask him, what does he do for a living? Well, I just left a job interview. I got rejected for the 10th time. I have no place to live. And so I'm just going to come lay here and go to sleep because I'm stressed out. This nonprofit came by and dropped some food. I'm grateful that they did because I really had nothing to eat. So thank you for asking me what I do for a living because I don't have a job, right?
Right.
Context. Now I uncovered this man needs food, but he needs a way to buy his own food. He needs a job. You see that?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Right. And what was your second question? Why are you laying here?
Yeah, I was basically like, why did he choose the park bench? Like,
And then that's explained by the first one because I'm homeless.
right.
This is where I actually lay all the time. These are the only clothes I have, right? And so just asking a question helps you do this most powerful thing in designing for change. And my nonprofit has the privilege of doing this when we work with people. We can build these empathy maps that are more of a collaborative visualization of a person. It describes what the person says, what the person feels, what the person thinks, and what the person does. And if you can understand this about a person, you will always be able to design the right thing for that person. Imagine nonprofits truly not trying to address a problem, but trying to address the person, meeting with the same homeless people and asking the same amazing question you asked. Well, what do you do for a living? I see you laying here on this park bench. Your suit's nice. It's going to get dirty. What do you do for a living? And he says, I don't have a job. And he feels tired and hurt. And he's thinking, this is it for me. And he does is lay there on that bench, hoping that opportunity will come. So powerful. And now you prayerfully are more powerful with understanding this because now it aids you in making the proper decision making processes when you design something, no matter what it is, whether it's technology, whether it's a solution, whether it's supply management and how do we create better systems for supply management. It does not matter if you apply this, You will be significantly unique, different, and relevant, which is the most important thing that's valuable. Okay. So believe it or not, we say designing for change. So designing for change is design thinking and change management incorporated all into one, right? And so we use design thinking and of course Dana Miller's equation of change as processes for our programming. So we went through the first stage there, which was to empathize. And I gave you an in depth look of how we should empathize by observation. Remember, immerse yourself in the real world, get to know your population, understand content, uncover needs, and listen for feedback. Next, you should be able to define now, even what is the real problem, right? I assume this person on the bench was poor, they weren't. Or I assume that they weren't poor and they were, but I can't define that unless I've done the work of empathizing. Now, based off of uncovering the needs and now defining that what that is, I can now ideate. I can come up with 100 ideas of how to help this person and narrow that thing down to three really great ideas that I know I can do. I know it's cost effective. I know it's tangible, and then I have to prototype those things. So I create the concept into real life, I make it tangible, and then I need to first test it to make sure it is a workable invention. And so this is how you design for change. This is how at the path in nature to change, we design our solutions to always create social change. For instance, in Gary, Indiana, we have a project right now that we use in urban farming. Urban farming is something that is very unique, but something loved by people in Gary, Indiana. So we got to know the population. We understood the context that white flight occurred in Gary, Indiana 50 years ago. And because the blacks that were there were so poor, they didn't have the opportunity to make a better life after the steel mill had closed. Uncovering the need that there is something economically wrong with Gary, Indiana, and that economic stability is actually the solution that they need there, not new bike paths, not new. They need economic stability. They need a way to make money there. But guess what? Listening to feedback, people are telling me, and Gary, I love urban farming. So now that I have all this context and I understand what the Gary individual says, feels, thinks, and does, I can now define, like I said, economic stability to be the problem and ideate different solutions of how we can redo Gary, Indiana's economy doing something that they love to do. Now creating project hashtag Gary, where that is the prototype, but we are going to test this prototype next year to see is it tangible, does it lead to economic development? That is what happens when you design for change. That is the power that you can have with whatever it is you do. Might I ask you now that I have you, what is it that you do educational? What is your degree in?
My degree is in business administration with a minor in marketing.
Perfect. So imagine applying this to marketing, how powerful you would be meeting the mark of the companies that you work for, the portfolio that you develop, that you use designing for change as the methodology for your marketing. Mm, here you go. So, as I promised all of the other students, if you want to work with us, you can. That's what we want you to do. It's so important that students are involved. We're going to create a social task force. We are located in College Park, mind you. We're going to create a social task force of students that are looking to deal with some of the issues that we are having right now. So, the why we're asking this is right now our climate is at risk of another war. Things are significantly worse racially. States are creating Jim Crow style laws to hurt BIPOC people. Do you know about the Jim Crow style law that's happening here in Georgia?
No, I can't say that I do.
It's called SB 1070, Provision 1 and 2. Provision 1 says that police can demand papers and investigate immigration status if a person is suspected of a person being undocumented. The second thing they can do is arrest individuals without a warrant if they believe they are a deportable immigrant. That is a law that just passed in Georgia, which means they are legally allowed to discriminate against Hispanics and Asians and Black people, suspect them of being undocumented, and arrest them just on belief that they're a deportable immigrant. Did you know that that was happening right now in 2024? Yeah. Okay. Another one that's happening is in Florida right now. There was a law that was just passed that requires to unfund any DEI support from any government funded entity. So if you are a university in Florida right now, the Florida government has passed a law to remove any funding in your institution that is associated with DEI, which means thousands of people just lost their jobs in Florida being unfunded just because they did DEI work. So these are laws, these are things that are happening right now while we're all focused on what we're focused on. Racism is waning, it is progressing. So the what is we're designing a team to address this America current cultural issues through applied education, issues through social change driven initiatives and knowledge sharing, which is what we're doing right now with our communities. So if you would like to join us in this work, align yourself with a project or work with a project with us until it has impact, here is my contact information, and that is the end of this presentation. So, did I keep my promise to you? You still there?
I'm sorry, I had somebody in my office real quick. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, it's no problem.
I think I learned a lot, and I really appreciated it. I
So,
would say,
are you changed?
oh yeah, yeah. I think I learned a lot. Like it taught me some things. Like you said, like sometimes we do make assumptions. You know what I'm saying, without even trying to get to know people or learn about what's going on with them. So that's definitely something I can take with me in the future, and like you said, apply it to many different situations. So yes.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. So feel free to join us on Facebook. Send people our directions so they can get this same presentation or the same work. And if there are people you know that may be interested in doing work like that, feel free to reach out to me and let me know about them because it's important that we grow this methodology and it's important that we grow to be empowered to do something about where our future is going. But that's it. That's the presentation, and I'm prayerful that you enjoyed this conversation and hope that it was helpful.
Yes, I did. Thank you so much again. I really did appreciate it, and it was interactive, like you said, and it was good. I liked it, so thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and have a great rest of your